If you ask many people, even faithful Christians, what Lent is, they'll tell you that it's when we give up a bunch of stuff. For them, Lent consists of formal, negative rules which sound like an endurance contest. Can we go for 40 whole days without that glass of wine that we've come to enjoy every night at dinner? Or can we see if, in 40 days, we can give up some sin that we realize that we've grown accustomed to? If you look at the rules for fasting and abstinence for most of Christian history, and still today among Eastern Catholics and Orthodox, what the Church requires her children to do in the Latin Rite, well, it's pretty weak. We've gone from 180 days of fasting a year to 2, from fasting from midnight before receiving Holy Communion to 1 hour, and of course at Prince of Peace you could be chomping on a hamburger during the Kyrie and still make the communion fast. From abstaining from not only meat, but oil, dairy, and marital relations, to just giving up that same hamburger I said that you could eat during the Kyrie and still make the communion fast. Yet still, people tend to think of Lent as merely a time of sacrificing, or they use it as the diet program that they didn't get on when their New Year's resolution failed by January the 2nd. Now, around the 1970s, some very well-meaning priests urged their people to start doing extra things instead of giving up. The word sacrifice and the disciplines of the church were rejected as being just too sad and depressing. Now, the positive aspect of this cultural change in Catholicism was that many Christians began to do more for the poor, attend church more regularly, and make Lent about making good changes for spiritual growth. But we still have lost the rigor of the ancient church, which formed Christians from their youth as soldiers trained for spiritual warfare, and who were prepared for martyrdom because they'd been denying themselves all along. But that was a different time, when people didn't have as much of anything as they have now, and people had much less time and energy for whining because they had to survive. Hashtag first world problems wasn't a thing, right? Yet no matter how comfortable our lives have become, we still are not exempt from having to render an account to the Lord for how we've used all of those blessings. Which is why I think the argument needs to be made that we actually need the ancient penitential disciplines of Lent more, not less. We have become, in other words, soft. And not in a good way. The irony of the season of Lent is that it urges us to be hard on our bodies and on our wills so that our hearts do become soft, or at least softer. The tenderness that Jesus displays with sinners is natural to him, but it isn't to us. That softness doesn't come from sentimentality or emotionalism. The soft tenderness that makes human beings great is won from our humility, penance, and innocence. Whether that innocence is always there or restored. That good softness of the heart, which keeps us from the bad softness, the one of self-absorption in body and will, is what the entire venture of Lent is really all about. Eastern Christians often speak of Lent as bright sadness. When we come into the church, we immediately notice the austerity and sobriety of the worship environment. The Hebrew A word of praise which I like the altar servers to say is Alice Chalmers, okay, is suppressed because we can't say the A word during Lent. Dark purple vests the church's altars and ministers. The flowers are gone. Gold is switched out for silver. Tallow candles burn their way down to nubs. And the festive sounds of the organ are silenced, except to sustain the singing. It may seem like a period of monotony and shadows, but it is when we stay with that, we let ourselves stand fasting and mortified through the seemingly endless long church services. Think about how the tract that we've just heard before the gospel is the longest tract in the Roman liturgy. And our choir is to be commended for working their way all the way through that incredible piece of music. By the way, before Mass, they also sang, I asked them to sing the Litany Divine Pacis, which has actually been sung in the Ambrosian liturgy even today. It's not a Roman thing, which is why we did it before Mass. It's a litany for Lent which is so ancient that it mentions a form of capital punishment that the Romans actually got rid of because it was too barbaric for them in the 3rd century. That's how ancient that piece of Lenten litany is. So as you're bored this afternoon, look up Divine Pacis in the Ambrosian Rite. It's really a tremendous way to pray for so many beautiful things during Lent. But as we go through these church services, which seem like they go on and on and on, or sermons that go on and on and on, sorry about that, okay, something happens deep within our souls. We begin to understand that this sadness is indeed bright. As the great liturgical theologian Alexander Schmemann writes, the church even in this is very wise. Because we just can't pass from our normal state of mind, made up of fuss, rush, and care, without quieting down. Our sinful nature doesn't go to that place naturally or quickly. We have to be gradually led into that place, going out into the desert with Jesus and then experiencing hunger and thirst so we can know what truly fills us. My soul has desired thee in the night, O God, before dawn, for thy judgments are a light upon the earth. In the darkness of Lent, we let ourselves know to the core that bright sadness. Again, Alexander Schmemann, the sadness of my exile, of the waste I've made of my life, the brightness of God's presence and forgiveness, the joy of the recovered desire for God, the peace of the recovered home. Such is the climate of Lenten worship. Entering into the bright sadness helps us to see that Lent is most decidedly not the time in which something good may be forbidden, as if God is some kind of torturer. On the contrary, Lent is a return to what should be our normal life. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden were fasting from evil and the wiles of Satan. And it is when they stopped fasting from the absence of good that suffering and death enter the world. Spring comes to our hearts again when we go back to that original primordial fast, when we can gaze upon forbidden fruit and hear the slithering serpent, and it does nothing to distract us from our joy. The spring of Lent has come, the light of repentance. So let us receive the announcement that Lent has come with gladness. For if Adam had kept the fast, that we are asked by our mother, the church, to keep, we would still be in paradise. So let us embrace the true fast of Lent and be led by it through the angels with fiery swords who protect the Garden of Eden back to our true homeland.